Okay, welcome to lesson 2.3. We're talking about normal curves, the empirical rule, and the social topic that's going to be tied into this is race and intelligence. Is there a connection? Should we just take all studies that are published at face value? But first, before we can get into that aspect of it, let's understand what a normal curve is. So a normal curve has this shape with right here as our center. So things that we need to know is it's always going to be symmetric and bell-shaped. The mean equals the median. And this happens when we have a normal curve because the data is symmetrical and bell-shaped. And most of our data points are close to our mean. Okay, they're close to the center there. And let's take a look at a specific example here. We're going to use IQ scores today. So IQ scores are thought to be normally distributed. And again, if you see this normally distributed, that tells you we are dealing with this symmetrical bell-shaped curve where the mean equals the median. A mean of 100 and a standard deviation of 15 points. So standard deviation is 15. Here's standard deviation to the left, and here's one standard deviation to the right. Two standard deviations would mean 2 times that amount. So 2 times 15 is 30. So this distance right here would be 2 standard deviations. And this distance is 3 standard deviations. So 45 points is 3 standard deviations if your standard deviation is 15. Okay, empirical rule. Now, the empirical rule is something that we are going to use a lot. If any of you were in IB math last year, you're going to see that this is going to contradict some of the things you learned in there. So just bear with me. This is how AP Stats approaches it. I think this is more accurate, but we can talk about that later. So the 68, 95, 99.7 rule states that within one standard deviation, so here's my mean, that's one standard deviation to the right, one standard deviation to the left, 68% of my data points will fall within that range. So fall within one standard deviation of the mean. And again, that means plus or minus one standard deviation. So I could go up by a standard deviation or down by a standard deviation. But 68% of my data points will be within one standard deviation of the mean, regardless of whatever your standard deviation is. But this is true for anything that is normal. If we go within 2 standard deviations, so in this case, 2 standard deviations is 15 plus another 15, that gives me 30. And 30 above, 30 below. So that's 2 standard deviations above and below. 95% of the data is within 2 standard deviations of my mean. And the 99.7 rule states that within 3 standard deviations of the mean, so going up by 3 standard deviations or down by 3 standard deviations, we will capture 99.7% of all data values. Sure, there's going to be some way out here and way out here, but the vast majority are in here. Okay, so these are important numbers. You do need to know these. So 68% of the data falls within 1 standard deviation. 95% of the data falls within 2 standard deviations. And 99.7% of your data will be within 3 standard deviations. So let's see how we can use this to our advantage now. And turning it over to the second page, this is going to be our strategy for any normal curve problems. Okay, so anytime you see the words that something is normally distributed, you're going to want to go through these 3 steps. First step is you are going to draw and label the curve. You've got to show the mean, the standard deviation, little tick marks, and shade which part of the data you're looking for. Second, you will perform calculations. So here's where our actual math comes in. We will calculate some things. And then we have to answer the questions in context. And I hope you're beginning to see that context is going to be critical in everything we do in statistics. We have to state that. Okay, so let's say, here's a problem. We're going to follow those same 3 steps. We take an IQ test and we get a score of 130. Assuming that IQ is normally distributed, so I've got those key phrases there, and I'm given the mean of 100 and a standard deviation of 15. What percentile am I at? Okay, so step one, we're going to draw and label. So let's draw my curve. Again, I'm drawing my bell-shaped one, and don't worry if it's not perfect, but you do want to draw this every time. I'm going to show where my center is, and it was 100 was the value. My standard deviation is 15, so that'd be 115, 130, 145, and we'll go in the opposite direction also. So 85, 70, and 55. And again, I'm just adding increments of 15 and subtracting increments of 15. We do have to label it also, and by labeling, we put an N to mean that it is a normal distribution. And within parentheses, we have to state what the mean is and what your standard deviation is. So anytime we've got a normal distribution, you are going to be writing this. So we have now drawn it, we've labeled it. So that was step one. Step two is calculate. So I want to calculate where is 130. Well, look at this. 130 falls exactly two standard deviations above my mean. Okay, so let's see what is 2 standard deviations above the mean. So how does that tell us our percentile? Well, let's take a look here. So 2 standard deviations here, okay? How much of our data falls within 2 standard deviations? I'm going to use a pencil actually to do this. So within 2 standard deviations, we have 95% of the data. Okay, so I am higher than 95% of the data, but there's still some over here. And I need to account for this piece over here. So the piece over here is symmetrical with this piece. Does that make sense, hopefully? And if it's symmetrical, this piece plus this piece, I lost my train of thought. 95% plus these two pieces has to add up to 100. So to calculate this, I'm going to say 100 minus 95, that's the percentage that's here, and I'm going to divide it by 2 because it's split in 2 pieces. So that gives me 2.5%. So that means there's 2.5% over here and 2.5% over here. So 130 is above 95 plus 2.5, so that's above 97.5% of the IQs. Okay, and now we have to answer this in context. So we would say an IQ score of 130 is at the 97.5 percentile. Of what? Of IQ scores. Okay, so there I have finally answered the question in context. Okay, and let's do a second part to this. What score would I have to earn? So I don't know what the individual point is on an IQ test to be at least the 85th percentile. So that means I want 84% of the data below my score. So again, we're going to draw and label. So here's our graph. Not as good as the first one, I'd say, but we label it. It's normal with mu equal to 100, standard deviation equal to 15. We know that 100 is here, and I want to be at the 84th percentile. I don't really know where that is. I know it's going to be on the right-hand side, so I'm going to just sort of draw this in. I don't really know where it is, but I want all this to be 84%, right? And I am trying to find this X value right here. Okay, so let's figure out how we do this. So step 2 is calculate. You don't have to write the word calculate, but I find it keeps me organized to make sure I follow all the correct steps. So here I would say, okay, well, I know that within one standard deviation, let's see how we're going to do this. Actually, let's calculate and take away 50%. So 84% minus 50%. So that's going to be everything to the left here. That gives me 34%. Okay, so that's accounted for if I were to put 50% was all of this. So 34% is here. Okay, that pen is dying on me. That doesn't help. So I'm looking at this part right here. 50% is up to the median, and now I need to have this amount. So how am I going to figure out what 34% is? Well, we know that 68% of the data is within one standard deviation. So 68% divided by 2 is 34%. So this amount right here is equal to, so 50 plus 34 equals 84%. And remember, the 50% is from way out here to the median, and then from the median to whatever this x value is going to give me 34%. Well, we said that this is just one standard deviation above. So I would need to score my answer here. Need to score 115, because that's exactly one standard deviation above the median. So need to score 115 points to be at the 84th percentile. Percentile of IQ scores. Okay? So again, that will give me the 84th percentile. And we're going to do quite a few of these practice ones, but that gives you an idea of how we can manipulate our 68, 95, 99.7% rule. Okay, good luck.